And now it's time for us for the keynote speech. And for this session, we'll have with us on the StyCon Kerala 2014 very eminent personalities. It gives me immense pleasure in welcoming Dr. Sriram Nene, the very reputed cardiovascular NRI surgeon. Mr. Sriram Nene is also the managing director of R&M Moving Pictures Private Limited. Also, as we all know, he is Prince Charming of India's dancing queen, Madhuri Dixit. So I'd welcome Sriram Nene to do the first official keynote speech.
That kind introduction. Can you cue the slides? Two things. I just met Balagopal at Inc. And he and I really saw eye to eye, and he invited me here. I'm so glad I came because I'm just enjoying the talks thoroughly. More importantly, I'm enjoying the people who I've met so far. And there's so much energy and inspiration in this crowd that it really pushes all of us on towards doing great things. So thank you very much for having me. So I've got some good jokes and some kind of naughty jokes. So which would you like to hear first? Okay. So, you know, surgeons tend to be very prototypical, and as you know, I'm a heart surgeon, and so three doctors go out hunting, and they're hunting after ducks, right? And the first flock of birds flies overhead, and the radiologist jumps up with his shotgun, and he pulls the trigger, and he says, well, that could have been a duck, but it might be a goose. We'll need clinical correlation. And so the birds actually fly overhead. He misses completely. Next, the internist is at bat, and another flock of birds flies over. And you know, rather than pulling the trigger, he goes through his differential diagnosis and figures out which medication you can do. And so the birds get away again. Finally, the surgeon gets up, and the birds fly overhead. And he pulls the trigger as many times as he can. He, you know, turns and he says, pathologist, go tell me what that is. So my talk is a little unusual, and it's about saving the kokila. For some of you who don't know, that's the Asian koel. So when I was growing up, there was a story about a man who would go to work every day, and during the course of that, he would notice all of the flowers and the trees growing and everything else. As he got more involved in his work, became an entrepreneur perhaps, he started looking down and walking faster, and he got busier and busier and busier. One day while coming back, he looked up again and he noticed everything was gone. The trees were gone, the flowers were gone, and some of the other attachments around. Instead, what was there was a concrete jungle. I had this experience when I first came to India, and we had moved back here 3 years ago, and I was given the job of a secretary of a building. I thought this was exciting. Believe me, it's not exciting to be a secretary of a society whatsoever. But anyway, as part of my job, the coconuts and the palm leaves were falling down, breaking windows on cars, and so I had them trimmed. And when I first came, I noticed this bird would start singing at about 7 a.m., and it had a very guiling call. Some of you may have heard it. It was just played. And after I cut down all of these branches and whatnot, the music was gone. And what I realized is I had eliminated this bird's habitat. And in so doing, I prevented the cars from being damaged. But what I'd done was basically eliminated something else, which was also very beautiful. And so the Asian koel becomes a metaphor for culture, and in this case, dance, as you'll see. So my roots started in India in that my parents immigrated from Dadar in Maharashtra almost 25 years ago in 1963 to London. They were in search of a better life, and at that time it was about 50 years ago, 25 years after independence. They were in search of a better life, and their thought was that education is what would set them free. And my folks came from very humble beginnings, and my dad had 5 kids living in a 2-bedroom flat in Mumbai, which is actually quite good in India, considering if you look at the overall population. And so I was then born in London and grew up in the US. And during my growth period, my father was always inquisitive, always wanted to travel, always brought new things home. And one of the things he brought home when I was 11 or 12 was this computer, an Apple IIe. And back then it was one of the whiz-bang gizmos, an 8-bit machine, which really did not have much going on when you compare it to the smartphones now, let alone the computers. But I taught myself to program because there were no teachers back then. And I was amazed at what you could do. And I created a corporation which actually produced software for education and for realtors, and had won a few awards for entrepreneurship by about 18. Unfortunately, my parents, who came from very conservative, humble beginnings, said that you must be a doctor or an engineer or your life is over. And so I exceeded and went to some of the finest schools in the US and was very fortunate to have some amazing mentors, and I became a heart surgeon. And I worked in that job for almost 20 years. I got my license in 1993 and was doing about 300 to 500 cases a year and taking care of some immensely amazing people, and very rewarding because you could make the difference between life or death. But the problem was there was a certain inherent lack of scalability in what I did. No matter how hard I worked, at most I could do 5 cases in 2 operating room theaters per day, and the net impact was limited to less than 2,000 patients per year. When you look at the scope of the problem, there's 7 billion people on the planet. And in India in particular, there's 1.2 billion spread around 28 states, 30% of which are in the metros, 70% are in the rural areas. And so I thought to myself, what if I could use my previous talents as a software entrepreneur with my new talents as a physician and scale medicine to 7 billion people? And with no arrogance intended, I'm a very humble person, and I believe that if you have the passion for something and an idea which makes sense, you can find the means to make it happen. And so I created something called Top Health Guru, and we started to plan out how to do this by ingesting big data, figuring out what people have wrong with them with the symptom engine, and then directing them and changing their habits. And the biggest thing for me, and the hardest part for me as a physician, was that I would often see people 20 to 30 years into the disease process. And I would be operating on them, bypassing their coronaries, changing valves, taking care of aortas. But the problem was they were already too far along with their smoking, drinking, eating habits. So what I said is that if we could appeal to the least common denominator and get the message out, we could change how things happen. And so I'm giving a talk at the Healthcare Forum. You should definitely come and you'll see what we're doing with that. During the course of this planning, though, sorry, guys, the screen just went black. I'll keep talking. During the course of this planning, something happened one night. And as you know, I'm married to a fairly prominent actress in the industry. And she said to me one night that dance and culture are going by the wayside, that what's popular now in culture has nothing to do with what it meant. And for her, dance was a spiritual journey. She had started at the age of 3, had done most of the Kathak tenets and had won many awards, and that's how she was discovered to go into film. And at 16, she actually did her first role, but she was discovered at a recital for one of her Kathak performances. And so her desire was to build something which would scale, and we had been studying how to get the message out to people and how to become everyone's doctor in their pocket. And what we had found was that the smartphone at that time when I came here only went to 150 million people, and now actually, I'm sorry, to 50 million with 150 million internet users, and now it's 300 million internet users and 100 million smartphone users. But 1.25 billion exist in this country. And so what we also found was television is a very powerful medium, and media as per se, is a way to get the message out and teach people and change the way they think. In addition to that, feature phones are very powerful, and SMS-based messengers in India work much better. So we created a company called R&M Moving Pictures, and this was my first foray into entrepreneurship. And the idea was basically that all screens would converge. The big screen would become the television would become the laptop would become the iPad, and the iPad would become the phone. And what we said is that if you could control content across those, then you could become the one who delivers it. In addition to that, we could use that for the good of everyone by informing them, educating them, and getting them up to speed. And so what we created then, after 3 months of ideation in 2012, December, was something called Dance with Madhuri. And this was the first celebrity-backed online gamified dance academy, which basically tried to bring the world together around dance. And so what we said is if we could gamify it, socialize it, and build it in such a way where you unite everyone, this would become the next Facebook or LinkedIn for culture, and thereby make dance into something which it was previously. And just to give you context, in the olden days, not only in India but elsewhere, the Rajas and everyone else would have the artisans in their court. The artisans never had to worry about the money or where it was coming from, and whether they would get their next meal. Nowadays, they have to worry about that as well as everything else, and rights issues in India have not been a pretty thing, as some of you are aware, and we'll get to that. So, can you play this video, please? So this was, the good news was we could produce very, very high-level content.
Action.
Today we're shooting for teaching dance online. There are millions of languages in the world, but one language is universal, which is dance. So what we're doing is basically breaking down every song into a number of lessons. Every lesson will have a part of the song which I teach. They learn that part, they move on to the next lesson. By the end of all the lessons, they will have learned the whole song. So, get ready. Let's go all black. I've been dancing since 10 in the morning. We've been shooting for 13 hours continuously. Really tired.
She did a great job. So now remember, here's this guy who's a glorified plumber, meaning me, who has no experience with production, who was capable of pulling this off. So then, just play this video, please. I don't know how to say it in Malayalam, so I'm sorry.
You have seen her dance. You have loved her dance. Now you can dance with her. No matter who you are, no matter where you are.
It's time to dance with Madhuri Dixit.
Step into Madhuri's dancing shoes and explore the magic of dance.
Are you ready to rock?
Log on to www.dancewithmadhuri.com and compete with yourself, your friends, and the whole wide world in a fun, social, and interactive way.
Come, dance with Madhuri Dixit.
So this created as many questions. This created as many questions as it answered, in that, could we do this? Could we teach people in a remote fashion and actually expect them to upload and do that? So this was our first iteration, which we pulled off in March of 2013. And this was the app system which went with it. This was our month-over-month registration, so clearly we were having an effect. These were the demographics of the users, and as you can see, 18 to 44 was the biggest age, and predominantly female, but some males. But this was an eye-opener. What we expected was that only India would do it. It was an India-centric product, and as Modi says, made in India was this. But what we found was that while India was 50% of our audience, everywhere in the world, people were embracing this. And 14% of the US, or rather 14% of our usage was from the US. And so in the first year alone, this is what happened. Play this video. And this is an example of the teaching as well, as you'll see. We were getting thousands of uploads from this.
So before
and
we
the remarkable
start
part is we
the
actually
lesson,
were able to do
I
it.
want you to get familiar with some of the hand mudras. Your right hand with the lotus and the other hand is like a deer hand. One,
So
two,
these
three.
are all uploads from around
you're
the world
curling your hands
that
a
we've
pizza style.
interlaced here.
मेरा झुमका उठा के लाया यार वे जो गिरा था बरेली के बाजार में मैं तो ठुमका लगा के शर्मा गई बोली घूम कर बजा दे के मैं आ गई मुझको नचा के नच ले.
Okay, so this is the sign or the hook or the signature step.
आजा नच ले मेरी यार तू नच ले.
Chanat, chan, car will be separate.
ओ नच ले मेरे यार तू नच ले अब तो लुटा है बाजार.
Rara, 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 ra.
Thank you. So based on that evidence, what we said is let's scale this now. And I had spent zero on P&A. She had a fledgling Facebook site. I got an SEO, SEM team, and we built that out. She now has 16.9 million people as followers on Facebook. We now use that, social media and all that. All of these people, what they were talking about, we're actually evidence of the same. We're not the, I forget what he called it, the old money kind of established people. We're more of a startup, even though you have 30-year-old brands. So now you're seeing for the first time the new construct, which is coming out next month. And it's about learn, move, and unite. Learn accredited courses from the masters. So what we've done is created a global community, a global village for culture. And with us, Biju Maharaji, Saroj Khan, Remo, Terrence, Shamak Dower, all of them are coming on board, as well as 4,500 other institutes to teach and to be part of this experience. And so what we've done is we've protected the artists. We give rev shares to these guys. And the most amazing part of this is it's free for the user forever. And you'll see how we've done this. Next is move. This was a very interesting learning. I put a heart rate band on my wife for the dancercise episode, and I found in 15 minutes doing her dancercise moves for that video, her peak heart rate was between 130 and 160 the whole time. And you know, I'm a data scientist and a physician and all that, and I took a look at it and I'm like, you've just lost 400 calories in 15 minutes. Literally, I plotted the area under the curve. And so then I put this up on YouTube, and it became our #1 video because people can learn dance once, but they'll work out to this forever. And what became interesting is the value proposition for these people that what would you rather do, be on a treadmill treading water, or would you rather have some very beautiful woman in front of you goading you to exercise? And so I built out a whole fitness unit, which was complementary to some of the healthcare stuff we were working on. And with the new construct, we actually have wearables incorporated. And the whole thing is then put into a system where you have resumes and you have video profiles like Facebook, which we've created. So every time they learn, it's all gamified. They get points, rewards, and all that. They upload their videos and they go through the machinations. And then what happens is these same videos then become part of the Unite. They have followers and are followed. And the institutes have followers and are followed, and then the filmmakers and all the others who need dancers are on the platform. And they do a job post like LinkedIn, and they actually pay for the job post, and the users find jobs. And what we're ending up doing is sourcing talent from 206 countries and millions of users from places which would never, ever have been touched. So the open audition model is completely disrupted by this. And so DID recently announced and is coming on board, and they want to use this engine to find their next set of contestants on their next show. And so this is an interesting way to change how things happen. So this is the story. We create great courses to make you look and feel your best, that challenge the world, resulting in epic performances designed by the gurus, recommended by stars, loved by everyone, just for you. This is our model: online, offline, and market. Online, it acts as a Coursera Academy where it's free for the user forever but gets charged for certification only. And in that, you create a whole different set of things. You can move, dance, and stay fit. Offline, you get certification of gyms. There's never been a validation of gyms or institutes, which we can provide. And so when you go out as the consumer and try to find a good gym, they'll have pictures and a video resume which you can go to, almost like the Zomato or whatnot of restaurants. At the same time, we can help you do a contest post or a festival post or whatever you want. Finally, the LinkedIn for Culture is very exciting because it defeats some of the current models. So the learnings so far are as follows. And this is coming from a budding entrepreneur, so forgive me, and I'll take any mentorship I can get. We did a limited spend in the initial stages while proving the use case. I used all of the favors I could call, and in 30 years in the industry for her and 30 years in medicine and health for me, we could do quite a bit because she's an institution in and of herself. We did rapid prototyping. Within 3 months, we had a product out and launched, and we studied the data. I put full metric tools into that, including Google Analytics, Kissmetrics, Crazy Egg, and these are all things where you can map out exactly what happens. I can see every user's journey and see what they're doing. Because of that, we could plan our next set, and we just got out of the studio and filmed another 60 classes, which I'll show you a few as a hors d'oeuvre later, or as a dessert, I should say, to this. We built out our core team once the proof of concept was successful. So I only had an office boy, a guard, and a secretary when I started, and I outsourced everything as I needed it, and basically learned what I had to do. And so just what the one Rakesh Nair was saying, I didn't really waste time on things I didn't have to. And quite honestly, I was an entrepreneur years ago, but I haven't coded in ages. I've been operating and putting people back together. The aha moments were when people started to upload, and that's a very hard behavior to get people to do because it takes a lot of bandwidth. There's still learnings. The last thing is the contest showed we could gamify and socialize teaching. So traditional learning is this horrible thing which we all went through in my age group and probably in many of yours, where they would force feed you and ask you to regurgitate on a test. To me, if you're going to build the curiosity and create a lifelong learner, you have to make them believe that they're doing it for the right reasons. And whether it's in this or using gamification in medicine, the end result is the same, that these people have to do it because they like to do it. And so that's what we've done with teaching. And the interesting part is you can take this platform and put anything into it. I can teach tennis with Federer. I can teach music with any one of the maestros. I can do any of those. But it reduces the obstacles to uptake and thereby also increases engagement. Next, we used our strategic advantages. The brand and the concept had a definite alliance. Madhuri is known for her integrity in dance and actually has the skill sets. Yes, she's a very successful artist with 72 films over 30 years with 6 Filmfare Awards and all of this other stuff. But the main thing was that dance was her passion. And once upon a time as well as now, and she wanted to share it with the world. So when you have something like that, and then you have someone like me who acts as the enabler and the founder guy, you can actually build a team around you and go from that. The next thing was defining the audience. Based on the audience, we could determine what things we needed to film. There's a lot of stuff we could do. And the audience really told us what we could do, and it was a constant dynamic process because we would look at our YouTube data, we'd look at our usage data, and we would plan the next content strategy. The pain point still exists, though. AV rights are a very contentious problem right now. The Supreme Court actually ruled that they had to be shared with the artists. For some of you who don't know, in India at least, every artist who has ever done any type of song, dance, or film role does not share in the royalties of that film forever, in perpetuity. In the US, they actually have those residuals. And so what ends up happening is a company like T-Series or Eros or whatever buy this and they continually market it. So here you have an artist who's creating the IP and they have absolutely no means to enjoy in its success. So what we've done is actually created a different model where these artists are part of our team and we actually cut them in on the residuals, keep a top line expense there. You can see I'm learning the entrepreneurship very well. But we take a top line expense and we actually believe that they should be partners with us and be part of the whole culture and the community. So what we're trying to do is create a hippie village for culture. The next is CDN costs as we scale could be an issue. CDN is Content Distribution Network. And as we get more and more hits, the biggest problem we've had now is scale. When we initially released the site, we didn't know what would happen. We would now put one thing out on Facebook and all of our sites on Amazon would crash. Because what would happen is we had 16.8 million people on Facebook and we'd get a storm surge of 100 or 200,000 people coming to use the thing. And even with elastic occurrences and other things, we've still struggled. So we've now built up a very solid background of servers and this and that and the other, bit gravity, this and that. The last thing is production costs. As content scales, costs actually go down. And fortunately, I've been, associated with some amazing people. BBC Worldwide helped us with our first production shoot. 120 Media helped us with our second. And now I actually have the whole team in-house. So my strategy was simple. Outsource it until it becomes a profit center, and then either buy the company or bring the team in-house. And so we're on our track there. So what's next? When do you bring on investors? You can imagine with the brands we have, we are privy to quite a few sponsorship deals, and we're lining those up. So in truth, we don't need the money for the program or to run this. And in fact, now as we monetize this, our hope is that we'll be profitable from the start. However, I, of all people, understand and have learned that in order to scale, you need strategic people with you, and you need people who understand the vision, who aren't looking at just bottom lines, top lines, profit and loss. What they're looking at is what this means to the culture and the ecosystem. Because if this is successful, it will change the way you learn, number one. Number two, it will make dance and any type of art form into something which is easily accessible, because what it will do is democratize how you learn. Because it will go to anyone who has a phone. And actually, we're going one step further in India. This was the other learning. Only 300 million people have internet access, but 900 million people have television access. And so we're talking to Tata Sky to take this as a pay-per-view event like Air Javed, so that 900 million people enjoy in the lessons, and they charge them 10 rupees per month or whatever. But the return path would be a feature phone. So we're innovating to try to get this out there. I'm using some of the same contracts for healthcare as well. And so it's like NASA, you learn to go to the moon, and during the course of it, serendipitously, you learn all kinds of interesting things. The other interesting thing is sorting out the revenue model, which we've sort of talked about. So the conclusion is you can teach dance through a gamified, socialized environment while staying fit and connecting with the universe. It can be extended to art to create a global village for culture. There's still many challenges. Bandwidth is limited in India, but globally it's not an issue. Engagement and revenue models need to be sorted out. It potentially disrupts and unites several areas. Now, how do you disrupt and unite? It's when you change the ho jaiga and the existing model, and you put something into place that everyone can use, not just a select few. Finally, the biggest thing for me was follow your passion, right? I spent 20 years as a heart surgeon, loved every minute of it. Now I'm trying to scale medicine, scale health, scale culture. And this is something which is very important. I've got 3 more things if you'll be patient with me. Go ahead and play the AV. These are for you. They're specially made, and you'll see why I say that. There should be a little play box on the window, but it might be hard to get to. There it is. I'm gonna fast forward to this one.
Where the sari? Mil gaye. You do chapati.
This is for you, Kerala.
Oh, that means Polly Tolly. We will be doing Sari Ka Falsa, directed by the great Prabhu Deva sir.
साड़ी के फॉल सा कभी मैच किया रे कभी छोड़ दिया दिल कभी कैच किया रे
I am ready. Are you guys ready? Dance with Madhuri.
And one last one, just for kicks.
Vanakkam. Welcome to DWM. Rajni style.
So these are all new lessons coming up. These are sneak peeks because no one's seen them
before.
before.
It's going to be a poly-tolly mix into the dance form that I'm going to be teaching you today. Do you want to come join me?
If you don't recognize this guy, this is Salman off of JDJ, Jhalak Dikhla Ja, and he's a pretty prominent choreographer. All of these choreographers are from DID, Jhalak Dikhla Ja. There's one slide, if you'll humor me. Can you hit play, please?
In this class, I'll be teaching you Mera Piya Ghar Aaya from the movie Yarana. Mera Piya Ghar Aaya, O Ram Ji. Learn this only on Dance with Madhuri. Come, dance with me.
And one last one, and then I'm done.
I'm back with Dancercise on DWM.
So this was the one, we've got a full deck of fitness now. Almost 20 episodes with a wearable band and other stuff. And you can actually stay in shape and burn a lot of calories without even thinking about it. Thank you very much for all your time.
Thank you so much. It is a visual treat watching Madhuri Dixit dance. I'm sure all of you will agree to me, is it? And now I'd request our Thai Charter member, Jyoti Ashwani, to come forward to present the memento. Next, to give away the key speech, I'd welcome on stage Vani Kola, the Managing Director of Kalari Capital, New Age Funding Options. Vani Kola is a Managing Director at Kalari Capital, based in Bangalore, India. Her leadership at Kalari centers around her commitment to development of entrepreneurs and her conviction that Indian companies are poised to become global players. Vani brings 22 years of Silicon Valley experience as a founder of successful company to her role as a mentor and enabler to startup companies in India. She serves on several company boards and speaks widely on entrepreneurship and leadership. Ma'am, I request you to take the stage.
You know, I have a very important question. How many of you are really hungry? Few hands going up, and I know the rest of you are very kind, and hence you didn't put up your hands. I'm sure all of you are very hungry. So I'll try to keep this reasonably short, and I don't really have any slides for you today because my topic is really very simple. It's about what are the new age funding options. That's what I was asked to speak about. So can you hear me back there? Yeah, okay, good. So, you know, before I start, let me just ask, how many of you are entrepreneurs who have already raised funding? Okay. How many of you are entrepreneurs who may contemplate raising funding? So, you know what I thought I'd just talk about is a few of the basics from a venture capitalist perspective. So I don't think there'll be any thing that you don't particularly know, but I want to put it together in the way I see it. Funding has been in the news a lot in recent times. Who would have thought in India we would be talking about billion-dollar funding? When I came back to India in 2006, and by the way, just a little bit of background, I run a venture capital firm called Kalari Capital based out of Bangalore, and we have funded close to 60 companies in total in the last 8 years, and typically we are a Series A, Series B investor. And in 2006, really, there was not a lot of venture capital available. The concept actually wasn't very clear. Sometimes I would get really funny questions in the beginning on, well, you know, what kind of collateral do you want? And of course, everyone sitting here knows that venture capital model works very differently. Venture capital model works only in the end if you, for you and for the investor, if you really can deliver a high growth company. And it's not a funding model you should contemplate for many traditional businesses. I think the origin of venture capital had to do with nonlinear growth and really creating paradigm shifting technology because there is an accelerated value creation but significant risk associated with it. So it's a model, it's a great model, but like all things works in sometimes in certain situations and not in many others. And today, you know, in 8 years what has happened is it's kind of like venture capital has come of age in India because we are seeing a lot of companies that have created phenomenal growth, and I'll try to pick a company and just kind of give you some snippets along their milestone to sort of visualize this and apply it to yourself in whether and what funding options are relevant to you, right? But when you think about a successful company or talk about a high growth company and you say what is the recipe for success, you know, immediately two things come to mind, right? The team and the market. Of course, those two are the essential necessities and ingredients and the the prime movers of creating success. But there is a third leg of the stool, which is the funding. And a lot of times this doesn't get thought of, planned, or meticulously you know, organized as you would with your product and with your team. And I would suggest that you have to show the same care, if not more, on how you think about your funding. And if I look at the great companies in the last, let's say, decade that have gotten created, and I mean great by their sort of ability to capture significant market share very, very quickly, one of the integral parts of their success has been funding, and how they went about the funding, not just the money, but who and how matters a lot. So I'm going to talk on the who and how. So you have a great idea, and you know, you really want to take the risk, you're going to jump in, and what next, right? You need money. More often than not, you go to friends and family, and you know, like with all things, there are pros and cons, right? I personally, I come from having been an entrepreneur, having built 2 companies in the Silicon Valley, and then moving to India to see if I can be part of a influencer in this rapidly growing ecosystem. And I always felt that was the wrong option for me, taking money from friends and family, because, you know, obviously if you have created the next Facebook or the next Snapdeal or the next Flipkart, that's fantastic. That's great that you did that. But if you look at the statistics of how many companies actually succeed and reach that scale, to then also be burdened with a responsibility of you know, financial obligations that are to people that are very close to you, I think you have to really think hard before you try to take that step, because I think that friends and family is the anchor to hold you down through the up and downs of building a company, and you don't want their ups and downs to be so tightly connected with yours, and you certainly don't want to take your dad's retirement fund and put it into your new startup. But if that's the only money that's available to you, and you know, you've thought about the challenges, then so be it. Really, the you know, first function of raising money will come from today. There's a lot of angel groups that are companies that will fund you before we kind of come into play. The seed capital and the angel capital, again, if you're taking money from someone who's from the domain and shares your value system, then I think that is fine. And typically the angel funding in India is maybe from 50 lakhs to 5 crores. That would be sort of the range that we would call angel funding. Maybe a consortium, maybe one person. But again, what I have seen in the last 8 years is there are some companies that have done very well with angel funding and some not. And it comes again from two factors. One is the investor you're bringing in, who has now a lot of rights into your company, aligned with you in your agenda, in your values, and will they be enablers or hurdle when you go forward? You might have gotten the money today, but we see oftentimes downstream when the next level investors need to get involved, sometimes the cap structures, which is really means the shareholding structure of the company, is really not set up, or existing shareholders alignment with future shareholders is in conflict, and you know, there are many, many challenges like that we have seen. Of course, we have also seen plenty of companies where, you know, the company started out with a very good angel investor who really helped the company, mentored the company, you know, enabled them to grow, and that's the good news part of the story, right? Now, by the time you come to a venture capitalist, which is probably around 5 to 50 crores, let us say, in size of capital based on the stage of the company and timing and sector and all of that, you know, you have probably a product and a market validation and so on and so forth. And by that time, you know, in India, there are probably about half a dozen funds that you could really go to. And it is still local capital. And I mention this because the local versus global is a choice that is playing out a lot in India today. So the venture capital is still local capital today, because without that anchoring, without sort of that, let us say, stamp of governance and a company that's well run, the basics all in place, and someone local who's really integrated into your business, it's really hard to bypass that and get global capital. So the place where global capital comes into picture is really in the growth stage. And the growth stage, today, the amount of capital available in India is very, very limited. So growth stage would be, you know, wherever from your 50 crores to, let's say, 500 crores will have to come sort of from investors that are outside of India, but India is on everybody's radar today. It's a lot of capital appetite and interest, and these are growth funds, hedge funds, and other global establishments that want to deploy money into India, right? So, you know, those would be the various stages of funding, and you know, some of the considerations that you should think about is that I see often play out is dilution versus ownership versus upside. And there's no really easy answer to it, but I think what you want to understand here is many times when someone is coming to invest in your company, they have their own minimum ownership requirements. For example, we would never really engage in a company if we couldn't get a ownership, depending again on the stage of the company, between 20 to 40%. And oftentimes what has happened is the companies are set up in such a way that there's really no room for an investor who has their own ownership requirements, because at the end of the day, I sit on no more than 8 boards or so it's time, value, opportunity, cost. So for a small ownership in a company, to take on the burden and responsibility of being engaged in the company is something most typically we would bypass. And so you need to understand in this funding value chain, what are the various sort of stepping stones in terms of ownership requirements and players, and be thoughtful about that as you plan the future of your company. I thought what I could maybe give you is just a little bit of a, let's say, case study in financing and returns on how this industry actually works. Remember, we already talked about, there are many, many failures in the industry, which is part of what is factored for the successes that are created. Obviously, when you are engaged with an investor, they believe you can be one of the success stories. And, if that premise is not there, there is no conversation. But we did a Series A investing, which is a typical venture capital investing in a company most of you probably heard of called Snapdeal. And at that time, the company probably had all of 20 lakhs in lifetime revenue that they had created, and they had raised a small amount of money from Kunal's ex-boss in Seattle as an angel investment, probably about 3 crores. And in today's value, his return is probably around 600 crores. And that's not untypical of when a company is really successful, the kind of returns that come. And we came along and we committed about 10 crores to the company. And like I said, at that time, the company was very, very small. And the next round of funding after that was around 60 crores, which was still done out of India, because that's still within that 50 crore range that I told you about, and that pool of capital. There are still players in India who do that. But post that, the company had to go through a transition, which they had to figure out how to do. So that took a 12-15-month process, because when you go to raise money from global capital, then the type of requirements from the team, from your responsiveness, from the type of CFO you have on board, all of that change, right? It may still be the same company, same founder, but you really need a experienced management team. You yourself need to sort of perhaps go through a transformative process on what is it that global investors look for, what's your language. When I say what's your language, obviously we all know it's English, but what is it that they're looking for in how they evaluate your company. And I think the next round was like 180 crores, and following that was 600 crores, and the most recent round you would have seen in the paper was like 36,000 crores, I think, that they raised, something like that. So, approximately. So, this is various stages of a company. And first of all, why would anybody give money like that, right? So that's the next question. This sounds like a lot of money, but it's a company that day on day has continued to have revenue growth. There's not a single day that has gone by where they had higher revenue than yesterday. And year on year, they've been growing at a 5x pace, and there is a huge upside market opportunity. So what's happening is capital is coming in to those companies that have shown monopolistic tendencies to capture significant market share. It is not everybody's cup of tea. So one of the things you should evaluate when you're thinking of a company is to say, am I really wanting to create this kind of a high growth company? If not, how else should I be thinking about funding and return? Because remember, every one of this capital expects when they invest that they get somewhere between a 5 and 10x return. And if they're not convinced that there is at least a reasonable business plan and a chance that you can do that, then that funding source dries up. So one of the topics that's important is the funding, not just venture capital funding, but funding in India is in its all-time high from a vibrancy and interest that I have ever seen, but it's extremely uneven. It's extremely uneven in terms of the preferred sectors. So, it's kind of like the rain in Spain only falls on the plains or something. So the rain falls only in certain places. So it's, so there are sectors that have potential for very, very high growth, and those are the sectors that are able to access capital. And again, when you think of your company, one of the things is I see a lot of entrepreneurs have good companies. Maybe they are not ever going to be a billion-dollar company, but that doesn't mean it isn't a good company in the value it provides its customers and what it can do for you from your personal satisfaction and even potentially a good financial outcome. But oftentimes those companies make the mistake of assuming that they will get rewarded in valuation and funding in the same way as some of these high growth companies, and it's really important to segregate that. And so what I'd like to do is sort of in closure, maybe say 3 or 4 things that I learned more as an entrepreneur, and I now see even more evident as a venture capitalist. One of the things that's important is you have to keep moving, you have to make progress. So whatever that means in terms of sources of funding, of course it's better if you get your preferred source of funding, but if you don't, then you take money from where you can. It's kind of like stagnant water breeds mosquitoes and flowing river spawns salmon. So you have to keep flowing. A company has to keep growing. When you are stale and you don't show progress, even if you have legitimate reasons for it and you are capable of breaking that chasm and taking off and the rising phoenix and whatever metaphors, really, really hard for people to not be part of a momentum play. So one of the important things is keep the momentum. Momentum obviously is either customer acquisition, downloads, revenue, whatever defines momentum for your business plan, but you want to show aggressive momentum. Otherwise, funding is really difficult. So if you can get A to B, then choose the best source of funding, but keep moving, don't stall, right? And oftentimes maybe because I've lived through good times and lived through markets going through horrible downturns where even good companies that really deserve funding don't get funding. And having seen that wheel of fortune, what I'm amazed is how many times companies play with their futures, right? They're playing with their futures thinking tomorrow will be better. You just don't know what tomorrow is. You do know what today is, especially with respect to funding sources. So oftentimes I see companies stall funding because they are going to get a better valuation tomorrow. And my advice to my entrepreneurs always is take the best money you can today, because there are so many unknowns about the future market on how it can change, and you always want to make sure you are financially able to take care of market opportunities. So raise the funding today as you can. And of course that brings the question of dilution. And my answer is, assuming that you have already self-opted out into a self-opted in into a venture model, which is that you want to build a high growth company which is going to be a category leader. If that isn't the aspiration, you should not even go to venture capitalists to begin with, because even if they were foolish enough to invest, what you would do from the dynamics you would create between them and you, and this is where you hear all the bad stories, right? So of what happened is there is very big missed expectations, and then there is disillusionment on both parties' side. So what I would say is, along the path of creating a great successful company, don't worry on dilution, because if you keep your focus on success and you can deliver that, like the case study I just showed you, you will do just fine, no matter what your ownership along the process has been to bring in that kind of money. And when you go to venture capitalists or growth funds, dilution is a reality. And especially in India, that causes a lot of emotional challenges, because people still think about this as a legacy business, and ownership and control. These things cause a lot of unreasonable emotional fears. And what I would say is, if you want to create the next Facebook, Flipkart, Snapdeal, whatever, you will unlikely be the majority owner of your own company, and you have to make peace with it to begin with. Otherwise, you are on pondering about it, you're going to waste very valuable time and defocus your company onto unnecessary challenges. And lastly, not all people are equal, so not all money is equal. Again, this is one of those things. Most often than not, it's a simple thing, but people don't seem to really understand that as much as your team and you make a difference to the company's success, the people you take money from can make a very singular difference. So these are people you're going to have them on your board, talk to them every week for the next 4, 5, 7 years. And you can't do that if you don't have a platform of trust and you don't have a very constructive relationship. So you have to evaluate that chemistry and the possibility that you are actually going to enjoy and respect working with this person mutually, obviously. And so not all money is equal, and you have to choose the partner that is right for you very, very carefully. So I tried to speak very, very fast, and I'm done. If there are any questions, we can always chat over lunch. But thank you, and good luck with everything you're doing.
I request John Chaco, our Thai Charter member, to kindly come forward to present the memento.